Okay, so we are going to move now more into the panel sessions. So I must say we are very honored to have in this panel executive level from TSO and coming and giving their view on how they see the progress and the step made on the RSC and RCC development. So I'm going to start with maybe 5 minutes going around with each of you, asking you from the perspective of the owners and the shareholders of these RSC, RCC, how do you see the development so far, and what do you think is important as a next step? And then we'll go with a series of questions. Okay, maybe you can start and we go. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So it's on? Then we use the other one. It's N-1 here. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
N-1 even.
Thanks a lot. We were introduced as a very high-level panel. I think that's a bit too much. But I would like to start with picking up on one of the issues Olivier made, which I think is very interesting. And that's about the future. In Statnett a couple of years ago, we stated the following. The future is uncertain, but electric. And that kind of has been a guide for us in developing the system. And I guess also when we are talking about the RSCs, we should think about that. How can those play a role in the ultimate way of solving our climate change issues, which we think goes through more electricity? To give you a figure, I was inspired by Joachim about the German case. In Norway today, we have around 50% of final energy consumption is electricity. So we are halfway. Then we did a calculation on what to do to make the next step. And we have to add about 40 terawatt hours on the current 140 terawatt hours to halve CO2 emissions in Norway. And then we need another 40 terawatt hours to drive out the last carbon molecules from our energy system. So we would have to go from 140 to 180 to 220, and then Norway would be carbon free. So we are in a slightly better position than Germany, I think. Quickly on the role of the TSO, and picking up on the previous speakers, I think that's always good. Our role is to keep the lights on, and as Joachim said, it's to balance the system, which is something different than security of supply of a whole country. So it's about balancing the system. Second point, as we see it, we have to develop the grid as a TSO to enable the value creation in society. That's both, of course, electricity to small people, but also to big corporations which want to do business and want to create value. And the third one, that goes back to my introduction, we think the third part of our target list should be to electrify energy demand in order to combat climate change. When it comes to cooperation around those issues in the Nordics, I think we can be proud. We have been cooperating for many, many years. I would say cooperation is in our DNA, and we have some very good examples on that. We cooperate on the physics of the system and, of course, on the integration of the markets, which are crucial, by the way. We have a strong belief that the markets are the servant to the master, which are the physics. That's the way how we should look at this. And the servant can make the operation of the system more safe, but also far more efficient. And I think that's extremely important because this energy transition, as Joachim was saying, is going to be costly, and we have to keep the costs down. One way of doing that is having efficient markets and all above of that integrated efficient markets as we have in the Nordics and in Europe. Examples of our Nordic cooperation, we have a very well-functioning power exchange. We have built interconnectors to each other. We have had a system of common green certificates. We have a common settlement. We have bidding zones. We have an awful lot of things in the Nordics which work. And of course, what's next? And here I think the new drivers about more renewables, more interconnections. We have also nuclear phase out in Sweden, and we have the whole agenda on electrification, that new drivers that demand new tools. We need new tools to be able to run the system also in the future, and I guess new ways of cooperation. Last week, actually it was on, not last week, it was on Monday, my operations manager told me that, by the way, Auke, the system imbalance this morning was 2,500 megawatts. What? I said, yes, 2,500. And the reason was the following. It was a cold spell, somewhat unexpected. There was less wind, but above everything, it was the end of the holiday, and people were still kind of in the holiday mode. So I guess I don't know how that translates into the market, but apparently the combination of a cold spell, less wind, and end of holiday made the whole system to be off balance by 2,500 megawatts. It was not a problem, but it was an indication of what future we are facing. When I say that we need also new ways of cooperation, I'm getting closer to the RSCs. I think we go from a world of cooperation to a world of coordination. And here I think the RSCs are very important. And they should become, and they have not proven they are, but they should become, at least in Copenhagen, an efficient service provider to the TSOs, so that we as TSOs can do what we are supposed to do, which is balancing the system. And here I think the proof of the pudding is in eating it. Are we efficient creating services which are valuable for the TSOs? I think that's the crucial question. I think that RSCs will be able to do that. It seems to me, what I hear from my people, that we get information from this not yet company, which enable us to take better decisions, and that's important. Better decisions will result in a higher level of security and lower costs. I think that's a good definition of better decisions. But there are some issues, of course. We need governance around those new entities in the TSO world. We need to respect national responsibilities. We need to keep costs low. And of course, we need to have a very clear understanding of each other's roles, so that there is no confusion about who is doing what, because that would undermine security of supply and the ability to balancing the system. So I would end off by saying that if good services are provided, I guess the TSO will ask for more. So then the RSC will have the right to grow.
Thank you, Åke. Maybe looking at politics, Tavi, you want to...
Yeah, thank you, and good morning for everyone. I'd like to use the chance that this audience is such professional and comprehensive and basically represent all Europe. And my such principle always that leading by examples. And I just like as warm-up change or exchange with you the Baltic example, how we really organize the Baltic RSC. And we have done it basically a bit different way, maybe there's other regions. And I think this is a really uniqueness of Europe, that that we have a very different examples coming from different parts of the Europe. And then I think this is our strength, and it have to be like that in the future as well. And if I talk about the Baltic RSC, then our Baltic RSC is a platform type of organization, that we do not have any kind of central office, we do not have any kind of manager cabinet in place, that we are really doing it decentralized, digital and lean way. What it really mean? That first, if we talk about, we do it very much a digital way, that I think this one of the such main benefits for us as a Baltic TSOs coming from Baltic RSC is really that we, through that process, we really digitalized our operational planning processes. This is a definitely very strong benefit. And this digitalization really allows to contribute many different or allows to contribute people from different spots really in real time. There are no need to basically bring all people together in one spot. And I think this is also allows, I think if I look at other examples, that it allows to contribute very much more equal way all DSOs who is the part of this RSC. Because if you are doing and put somewhere head office and try to concentrate the people, there are always this host country advantage. No doubt, this is so that this is the first, the digitalization. The second, what I also spoken, this really the decentralized way, this platform type of thing. And of course, the third is related that we really keep it lean. It means that all basically hosts, we basically separated this Baltic RSC based on functions that who is responsible in this certain function also cover the cost. Of course, we are, for those IT platforms, we are also pooling the revenues, but mainly it's really according to this responsible parties. That this is definitely one way how you can also to organize the all stuff, and this is, if I looking in the future, this is what we like to keep it, and we are very much, I'd like to say, against a planning or central such planning economy, that we do not such keen believers that all stuff must be coordinated very much centrally, and there are very much a concentration needed. Maybe it's coming from our past, that we are really such coming from the such centrally planned economy, and we have a bit hesitated against this kind of centrally planned economy, and this is why we like to be a very much decentralized and more such not so strictly coordinated way of behavior. Maybe this is just one approach from the Baltic side.
Thanks, Tavi. Ben.
It's on, yeah. Good morning, everyone. After 2 CEOs with ties, I now an operational guy like Joachim, not wearing a tie. But I'm really impressed, first of all, to see this big audience and to have some clue on what kind of words we can use. I'm a little bit looking and would like to understand who is in the room today. And maybe can you raise your hands, who is working for the TSO or an RSC? Oh, that's massive. Who is working for DSO or supply, retail, or generation in electricity? Who is outside of the electricity business direct? Thank you. Give some clue on, because now when we talk about in itself RSCs, I mean these are institutions and companies you would rather not know, because first of all, as normal users of electricity, you know that there is a plug and that you would like to use the electricity, and electricity should be there the moment you need electricity. And we as TSOs, together with all the others in the sector, we have to take care of that one. And why are we now these days discussing RSCs, and why we have this third congress on seminar on RSCs in a row? And that's very simple, at least for me, being responsible for the operations within the Tenet company. We are one of the founding fathers of TSC-Net in 2008. But the reason for that was that in 2006, already in Germany, due to the massive amount of investments those days in renewables, especially wind, it had major impact on our system, and especially in the Netherlands. And I was really amazed about the simple animation that Olivier showed us this morning about when there comes a wind front from the ocean, what are the implications for the rest of Europe, and especially in those days, the amount of installed wind capacity, even already in 2006. And that had as a consequence that more or less suddenly, or at least unexpected in those days, we had loop flows in those days of 2 gigawatts coming from Germany, blowing through the grid in the Netherlands and Belgium. And I can imagine if you have only 2 to 3 gigawatt import, then having an additional flow of 2 gigawatt, wow, that's really something what matters in your system. And that also made that we at the end came up with the setting, hey guys, we have to do it better among the TSOs. We cannot only anymore make the calculations per nation, per country, but you have to do it in a more cooperative way. And that was the reasoning to set up the RSC TSC net, that we start making some common security analysis. And that was a long, hard way to go. Why? Because you have to really come to common conclusions on and common agreements on how do you exchange data. Because if you want to calculate something, if you want to make some security analysis, you have to buy a computer, you have to buy software systems, and you need data. And data from the TSOs, you have to exactly know what is the exact state of the grid for tomorrow per hour. You have to know what is the generation, what is the expected load, and based on that, you have to calculate what are the flows in Europe and see where are the constraints. And it took us really 5 to 8 years to come to that setting. But nowadays, it's now, I would say, so critical for us as a TSO that I would say it is even a mission-critical setting. If in the evening, after that the market has closed, at 12 o'clock the power exchanges do their markets coupling, and later on in the afternoon, every TSO makes some calculations, what is the unit commitment, what is the generation in the different areas of Europe, what is the expected load, and based on that, we all try to put that together in one computer system and try to calculate how critical is then the system. Can the system cope with that or not? And based on that, we have to start with some actions to correct in order to make sure that we still are able to operate. But once in a while, the computer systems don't deliver the right answers, or we don't have sufficient reserves available. And then it becomes a little bit awkward, because then we have a non-converging solution for the next day, and then we hand it over to the operational people in the control room. And I can tell you, then they get nervous if they don't have a converging system in the evening before, because then they don't have a clue what's ongoing next day. They know it will be critical, and they don't know if something is going further than what expected, where to get reserves. So these days, at least in our area, with the massive amount of wind and a huge impact on that, together with the solar, has massive impact on the flows throughout Europe. And if, by whatever reasons, the data quality is not there, then we are really in a problematic setting. That also means that in the past, the guys in the control room for the real time, that was the most important. With their SCADA systems, I would even say these days, the guys in the planning department for the coming day, they are even more important. Because if we don't have a clue what is tomorrow the wind, what is the solar, or will there be fog or that kind of stuff, then we are in the blind. And this is what is now happening. And that will go further, because we are just started with integrating renewables. It will be massive more wind, massive more solar, and based on that also a lot of hybrid solutions to collect the energy when it is cheap, but that means that we don't have a clue what's ongoing. Therefore you need data not only from the big power plants, but especially from the smaller ones, and based on that calculations. So that means for me that these kind of services, which we are now implementing, is the only way we can survive. But on the other hand, also to put it in perspective, what we are building in Europe is, I would say, huge innovation. Because by defining these services with this common grid model and exchanging all this data every day to deliver it in time, to do the right calculations, to give the right feedback to the TSOs, in order that the TSOs can take their responsibility. But we are building a huge system which is not there in the world. And it gives us the possibility to run the European system as a seamless one system, while we are still an EU of the different member states in Europe together with the allied countries. And we should not forget what these challenges are, both from a technical perspective, but also from a governmental perspective. And that is, I would like to state about the relevance of an RSC these days.
Thank you, Ben. Maybe Enrico, looking at it more from Southern Europe, or also with a link with what you've done with Southeast Europe. What's your prospect?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning to everybody. I will try to summarize the perspective of the Italian transmission system operators regard to the RSC added value. As you know, Terna is a shareholder of Coreso since 2010, and the level of interaction and the trustfulness has been remarkably increasing due to the continuous interaction and the continuously increasing amount of services that Coreso provided for us. For instance, Coreso provided for Terna the capacity calculation service since 2016 for the region Italy North, with a high reliability and quality of the result. And this is quite an important point, because for this activity, for these specific activities, Coreso is one of the most efficient and skilled, I think, RSC for the capacity calculation. Not only capacity calculation, because Coreso provided for Terna also every evening day ahead and intraday congestion report forecast that give us a good indication about the condition of the electric system and what we have to be expected for the following day. So it's a sort of a step forward for the next coordinated security assessment service. And I would like also to mention the activity of Coreso during the cold wave in winter 2016-2017. So Coreso performed, I remember, valuable analysis, provided that the generation margins availability in several European countries and the possibility to exchange this margin across the interconnection. So this is a very, very good experience in terms of RSC. So in general terms, we can say that the role of RSC has to be considered an added value for the TSOs, and this should be the feeling that the TSOs have in front of the RSC activities. In this perspective, it's also necessary to avoid any overlapping between TSO and RSC in terms of respective areas of competence, and to strive at going towards their natural integration and completion. So I think that it would indeed be desirable that TSO consider RSC as their natural extension, providing services for a better coordination among TSOs. So I think that the most added value of an RSC is the position of a wider observer of the interconnected system. In other terms, RSC can support the TSO activities in terms of possibility, resources, option that can mitigate the risk, being the TSO's perspective usually limited to their own control area, or at least part of the neighboring system. So for me, this is the main added value for the RSC today, and also the transition to RSC to RCC is not so easy, will be strongly dependent from the regulatory framework evolution, the SEP implementation, but also the possible revision of the network code, and the methodologies that each region will fulfill according to the code requirement. I think also that a special mention is due to the SOR that will be approved by Acer next year. And also the SOR is an important key point, relevant point, because the transition from RSC to RCC since the SEP implementation and the related methodology is not completely clear when we discuss about CCR and the SOR. So something is, for the time being, has to be better defined. The evolution from RSC to RCC, I think, will not alter so much the characteristic and the specificities of RSC, but I think that will undertake in the near future a broader importance, performing more services and improving a lot the coordination of the TSOs. Thank you.
Robert, seen from Eastern Europe or close, what's your view?
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thanks to this audience check done by Dan, I know that I can also go to more details, giving this the Polish perspective to that. So as in the case of TENET, PSC also was the founder of TSC, Regional Cooperation, back in 2008, more or less for the same reasons. So I will not repeat what Ben said. But let me underline that at that time, that was, of course, first of all, that was a voluntary activity of the TSOs. And secondly, that until 2014, we ran it in a decentralized way. So this is, I refer now to what Tavi mentioned about the Baltic approach. So this is also something which is feasible, it can be always considered. We decided in 2014 to set up the TSC net in order to improve the regional cooperation. We achieved a lot over those years to cope with the challenges in the interconnected operation on the continent, I mean the TSC region. However, even we let's say funded very, let's say, sophisticated countermeasures like multilateral dispatch, which is basically moving generation up and down in one corner of the continent in order to relieve the congestion in another corner. I'm not talking about the efficiency of that, but at least that kept us alive. However, even with such sophisticated measures, we are not able to avoid the critical grid situations which suffered in summer 2015 or winter 2017. That means we still need to improve. From the PSC perspective, the direction of the improvement should be integrating more and more technical constraints into the market mechanisms. So this, I believe, what Oke also mentioned at the beginning. Flow-based capacity calculation is the example of that. But unfortunately, we have been struggling with implementing them for more than a decade in our part of Europe. Because waiting for that, we invested in the phase shifters, which were just intermediate solutions. Some people call them problem shifters, and this is quite a right term. And that means obviously that we still have the issues, maybe in the different parts of the interconnection. So that's why we need to improve our regional coordination. In the meantime, also, we found recently with the approval of Clean Energy Package, we found out this famous 70% target, which means more or less that capacity calculations seems to be complete obsolete process. So the focus now is on the coordinated security assessment, which is supposed to clean up what will be out of this 70% or whatever other figure, even if it's in the coming years it will be lower. So we really need to improve, and that we're really looking forward to the improvements of this coordinated security assessment. These are the processes which we are running for those 10 years at least in TSC, but also other regions the same. But we need the improvements, and we know from the TSC experience, from the TSC region, that this is very much linked to the issue of the cost sharing of the remedial actions, because the result of the coordinated security assessment is a list of actions to be taken, and those actions not necessarily need to be cost-free. We do have a lot of phase shifters, but they do not solve all the issues, so still need to do this redispatch. And unfortunately, or no, maybe naturally, we have not been able to find the solution to this cost-sharing issue among the TSOs. That for that we need the relevant stakeholders. So that's why from PSC side, we are really looking forward to the implementation of the methodologies from the third package. I mean, specifically Article 35 and 74 of the CACM and Article 76 of System Operation Guideline. These are the processes behind. In our opinion, should be implemented as a package because there are many. They are very much interlinked. So, and for that, for the successful implementation of those processes, we need the transparent, efficient, and RSCs which are working in a clear way and clear and effective way. And then, hopefully, once this is done, then I will be able to check by whatever app, maybe the remedial actions which are foreseen or which have been taken, not necessarily in the real time. I'm fine if I can do it a day after or a week after, just to have a look how we have improved things.
Thank you, Robert. So if I try to summarize the various points made, I think there were a lot of points about the need of having more data, digital tools to coordinate and so on. I heard this is a very important model in Europe, given the distributed model which we have in Europe in terms of aligning, synchronizing. And I also heard there is still some efficiency improvement to be done moving forward, and especially alignment with the clean energy package and the complex capacity calculation and so on. I think that's where we are, I think, at the first statement from the CEOs. Now, maybe I would like to open to the audience. Given these initial feedback, would you like to have maybe one or two burning questions around these statements which we have heard here, or should I continue with our own list of questions? Maybe I can open just with a quick check. Yes. Is there any possibility to get a mic? No. So, there's a mic. So maybe, yes.
Unfortunately, short of mics.
We are getting short of mics.
Hello, my name is Erik. I work for the Nordic RSC. I've been thinking about the implementation in the packages we get from the European Commission are increasingly complex, but at the same time the implementation deadlines doesn't seem to take that into consideration. And right now we're working with implementing a backlog, and we're at the same time going to start implementing new things. And I'm wondering how you see on that situation.
Yes, anyone wants to take this one? I very much support that view. So,
very good observation. So I mentioned that we are looking forward to implement some methodologies from the third package. And I have not mentioned the fourth package except this famous target for transfer capacities. But in my opinion, we should first complete the implementation of the third package and the 5 services which were described by Joachim. And only then we can move forward, because obviously we cannot do everything in parallel because we have obviously limited resources. That was also mentioned. So that is quite important, that we should put the right priorities. And it seems that the 5 services foreseen by the third package for RSCs, these are the right ones. Once we develop them, that will be really a good basis to move forward with the next 14 services, which the clean energy package foreseen for the regional cooperation.
So sequential is your response. So maybe Tavi?
Yeah, maybe one comment from my side as well. I think we should keep in mind that why we do that. I think this is important really, that I'm not so much worried about this timeline, because I think this is business as usual. I think all this kind of tasks are coming pretty short deadline, and I think we have had last 10-15 years already challenged to implement time-wise. But I think it's important, especially keep in mind what is our job, keep lights on and home seated. That I think this why is really important. And if so far, if we keep this why in really good shape, I don't care so much that is this deadlines there or not, because this is anyhow a bit as student law, that you do all those tasks in that time, how much time you have. And I think we can do that, and I very much support what Robert said, that anyway we start, we first implement those 5 functions, then going towards to these 11 functions, and I don't see that there are very much this kind of penalty for us, that if we couldn't do so far, if we keep in mind why we do that.
Okay, you want to add?
Maybe one reflection. Sometimes the perfect becomes the enemy of the good. And picking up on what you were saying, we have to keep in mind what is the ultimate goal, which is to keep the lights on and do it as efficient as possible. So I think there, and this is a very general remark, but where we can make a trade-off and say, well, we could do another twist to squeeze another little amount of money out of the system, but that would actually add awful lots of complications. We should probably say no. And maybe one approach here could be that we should have a somewhat more critical review on the, call it, cost-benefit of each of those things, and rather reduce ambitions. Start a little bit more simple, see if it works, and then maybe improve over time, but maybe not, if that's good enough. After 10 years in this business, I sometimes feel that the fight to find the perfect ends up in very many complications, which eventually become very costly and take a lot of time. So we need to find the balance, and I think we should be open to discuss that with regulators and with our superiors in Brussels, and say, well, if at the margin this other twist really doesn't give a lot, but it creates an awful lot of complications, we should not do it.
So we should be careful on complexity and cost benefits related to that complexity. And so Ben, you want to add?
Yeah, what I also would like to add is that I think that, and also Oke already hinted on that one, that sometimes we as technicians and TSOs, we are striving for the perfect solution, or to take every detail and actually every exception of every TSO into account. And I think that means that still we are in a too much time setting in order to get agreements. And I think that the pressure will even further increase from society regarding that we have to deliver. And I think we have to get used to it, that among the TSO business and the RSCs, that we have to come to faster decisions, faster solutions, and also we should start implementing it and gain experiences. Because you can think that you can, on paper, you can come to the theoretical perfect solution. I can promise you the reality is different. So just start with it, learn from it, and be much more agile than we ever can imagine. And that is, saying from a TSO perspective, not always appreciated internally in my company, but I think these kind of things we have really to get used to. And let's be very honest, if we don't do that, then there is a big threat that the politicians start even harder bashing on us, that we have to start and put even the most stupid things into legislations, like the 70% today in the clean energy package. I mean, and these kind of things can happen even more. So if we don't deliver, then some others will define what we have to do. And I promise you it won't improve on that one. So please deliver together.
Thank you, Ben. So, Enrico.
Yes, me too, as quite in line with the previous speaker. So we are a very complex business that is becoming always complex. So we have to set the priorities. So we have to start with the first services. For me, the first one, CGM, capacity calculation and coordination security analysis. A little bit less STA and OPC, and then to consider the other 11 and 10 function. Of course, is the very aggressive timeline, but we have to fix some priorities. Otherwise, we don't work so much. Well, thanks.
So this is a clear call for step-by-step pragmatic milestone rather than jumping too fast on complexity and running the risk of that. Maybe to continue in the dialogue, and I'm going to use one of the questions which we were thinking about is of course looking at it from the ENTSO-E perspective is always this question of RSCs or more regional service operators back to the TSOs. And there is always this question on what is the level of coordination, cooperation between the RSCs, and how do you see this evolving in the future? So where do you want to start? We could continue the same order.
Well, I guess you're asking for the obvious. If you look at from the Nordic perspective, we have an RSC in the Nordics. There are interconnections between the Nordic system and the Continental system. So I guess very obviously there need to be a coordination amongst RSCs in the next round. And I guess that is already happening on the continent, since that's a far more complicated system. But from our perspective, I look forward to seeing those RSCs when they're up and running and deliver, also have a good coordination amongst themselves.
Maybe I continue from that point, really, that of course cooperation and coordination are really key words here, but I think as a manager, and I'm not operational guy, my job is really organize and lead the company. And if I'm looking from the such processes point of view, you quite often, if you create a separate entity, there might be not only cooperation and coordination, there might be also the competition. And I think this is the main challenge if you talk about the challenges, different level, national, regional, EU-wide level, that how to avoid really that this cooperation really turning to competition. And I think this is the main challenge and main threat what is the on road of us. Because exactly, basically we are today as such extended TSO community here, and I think we should think about really very seriously together that how to avoid this situation, because this is exactly one point why we not established a separate entity in the Baltics, and why we keep it as a platform and decentralized, not to get in a situation where this RSC start to compete with the DSOs. I definitely very much honest with you, but I think this is the main threat because of this kind of power game we have seen in Europe, many different areas. I'm personally coming from public finances in my past, and I have seen there how different entities really not, maybe on paper they really coordinate and cooperate, but in real life they really compete, and this is what we should think about very carefully.
Ben.
Yeah, now first of all I think the RSCs have to, or the RCCs in the future, they have to deliver the functions and even to further implement the additional functions as described in the clean energy package. And then you get questions about the governance between what are TSOs deciding, what are the RSCs, how they'll team up together, and also what are we doing at ENTSO-E level, how to get involved within ENTSO-E decision processes and that kind of stuff. A lot of questions there to be raised, but I think even the question is bigger in that respect. And that is a governance question on a European level, because on the one hand we have this goal which we would like to achieve. The pressure will be increased by the new Commission having a very stringent targets regarding the decarbonization. And on the other hand, the energy system and especially the electricity system have to deliver on that one. But if we then go to the governance within Europe, we see that all the TSOs are to a large extent bound by their national regulator. And we see that, yes, on European level they have to obey the rules, but one of the things which are hardly covered in these rules is how to deal with costs in Europe. And that's exactly what already Robert was addressing. I mean, we can come to solutions, but then at the end also someone has to pay a bill if you start intervening into the electricity system on a European scale, which I think we have to do. But as long as we don't have a governance system in Europe in which the TSO, no, not the TSOs, but the member states, together with the regulators, have a much more pro-European approach in which they come faster to solutions which we can implement, then it will be quite challenging. And I think that will be one of the big challenges in the coming years, how we can also convince our regulators and our member states that they really start making it happen so that we can at the end deliver from a technical perspective. But that's more needed than only the technical question.
So the expectation in the next future, I think that RCC will be more involved as an active part in all the TSO's process. For me, the two mainstream are the capacity calculation process and the remedial action coordination at the system operation stage. But I think that RCC could help the TSOs to better identify threats to secure system operation arising from large-scale power flow and short-medium adequacy issues. In supporting TSO to adjust measure to mitigate this risk with a proper notice. So for this reason, Terna support and encourage the cooperation between among different RCC that act in different regions to ensure and to make more efficient the coordination at the TSO level. In our experience, of course, for the region Italy North, the cooperation between Coreso and TSC-Net will be at most relevance in this perspective, and I think that this coordination will be encouraged and simplified by a quick and efficient implementation of the CGM. At the same time, I want to clarify that it's important also to continue to clearly stress the different roles between TSOs and RCC. But I think new possible service, already part in the SEP, can be designed and implemented in the future also in different fields. For example, I think to the involvement of the RSC in the operational training staff process, that I think that is important. In terms of the relationship with ENTSO-E, I think that RCC could actively involve in the ENTSO-E activity for the topics that they are directly involved. And it's important to mention also that in the region where more than one RSCC are involved, the cooperation between the two RCC shall be carefully designed with the participation of the all concerned TSOs, because several models are possible for cooperation, but the effectiveness, efficiency, as well as a certain degree of redundancy shall be guaranteed. The specificities of the borders within the regions and also the expertise on served transmission network will be ensured. But it seems to me that it's very difficult to reach a sufficient level of knowledge in a very complex business process by only one RCC in a very large region. So I think that the cooperation of the RCC will be the key in the future, and we have to pay attention also for the new project and common project to the design in an efficient way the IT system, processes and tools. Thank you.
Robert.
Yeah, so the cooperation or coordination between our RSCs is natural, like cooperation between the TSOs. And I believe we have managed to, between the TSOs, not to be in competition, at least in operations. So that is quite natural. So I'd like to stress it, what was already said. We should avoid competition on the RSC level. That would be really a nightmare. And there are reasons for that, also the very important ones, because all the RSCs are owned by TSOs, and TSOs are regulated businesses. So it would be rather strange if the regulated businesses would set up some activities which are then in competition between each other. So I think that, in my opinion, there's no other way. We should avoid this as much as possible. Of course, as TSOs, we do have the role here, because this is up to us to decide about the setup or the allocation of those services, because we do have 5 RSCs, we have 8 CCRs, we have CCRs when there are 2 RSCs inside. So definitely there is a need to let's say, put those elements in the puzzle, but this is up to the TSOs to decide on and then the criteria. I agree with Enrico. It should be the most efficient and effective way, because finally these are the customers or the market participants who are paying the bill. So obviously we are using the TSO's funds for that, but TSOs have funds from the tariffs. So we should remember about this. So that's why the RSC services should be really crystal clear, also in the terms of the cost effectiveness, and that should be, everything should be. And that's why, for example, the services should be priced in a transparent way, which allows this efficient setup to be found finally.
Okay, you wanted to add something, and then Tavi maybe?
Yes. Maybe I just one comment that I'd like to really highlight that I think this is a wrong assumption, and we couldn't wonder ourselves that we as a TSOs able to control RSCCs up to at the end of the day, because I think every institution, every entity what you create, automatically this entity have a target to expand its impact, and this is also applies for RCCs. And we couldn't forget it, that at the end of the day, there are no such thing that we as a TSOs can control RSCCs up to end of the day. They are going their own way. Now it's a question, exactly as I explained, that how we keep this power balance between different institutions, ENTSO-E, RSCC, TSO, and this is the main question, and I don't know the answer.
I would like to pick up on one other issue in this competition versus cooperation dimension. And it relates a little bit to the question about all the things we have to do and how fast can we move. We are completely dependent on a good cooperation amongst the regulators. In our simple example in the Nordics, we have only 4 TSOs and only 4 regulators. But that's an awful lot of persons in one room when you have to move on. I think it's important that also the regulators, I don't know how many of them, I didn't count the fingers today, but how many people in this room are representatives from the regulators. They should be here, because if we are not in the same room, we are not in the same boat. And if we are not in the same boat, it's difficult to move on. So I think this would be a call for cooperation amongst regulators and, of course, amongst regulators and TSOs. We are in the same boat, and then sometimes we need pragmatic solutions and not difficult processes to get approval for a little thing which would delay a big project.
So a response in the audience. Regulators are here. Do you have any specific question or comments?
Erlita Bobadilla, Energy Marknads Inspection at the Swedish regulator. I'm very happy to hear the conversation. I'm very happy to hear that we need to cooperate, because without cooperation we cannot move further. So I want to say also the regulators are here because I believe that without cooperation or without the knowledge that we can do the better for the union.
Okay, so maybe I would like to continue on that idea and what was brought here. We had at that time in the clean energy package this concept of regional energy forum, which was kind of trying to give a direction on how to get something going. So should we do more here, or it's enough? What's happening from your own experience? Do you have any specific view on that? I remind, for those who are not aware, on the paper, the idea was to put exactly what you say on a regular basis, regulator, TSOs, and representative from the member states to agree on complex issue related to a national regulatory framework.
But I think the really question that are we invited regulators to this gathering or not? I think this is the first. We couldn't see them if we not invited them.
Yeah, I think we did invite them, yes. How many do we have as regulators? One. There are few. So few there. So not. Okay. So maybe regulators should come on the scene. But let's maybe, Ben, you want to, and then we, please, regulators, if you have a question or if you have a view, it's time to prepare it. Yes?
No, but I think that that was already my plea for further cooperation, not only among the TSOs and the RSCs, but also among the governments and the regulators. Because if at the end we don't create a setting in Europe, and you cannot, you can also try to do it with all the member states or all with all the members of ENTSO-E, 43?
43.
That's quite challenging, but I think that we have much more likeliness that we come to conclusions and really to actions if you organize that per regions, because then it is more likely that at least the culture differences are smaller, that there are more same kind of challenges in that area, and that you have a better understanding because you are neighbors, electrical neighbors, and that is at least what we have already addressed it already 2 years ago when the clean energy package was defined, that in order to be successful, yes, the TSOs have to further cooperate and to align together with the RSCs and with standard legislation within Europe. But as I said, as long as we don't get the further support of the governments and the regulators on these kind of things, and that they start also really in-depth cooperation, understanding what's ongoing, understanding if certain support schemes are worked out or whatever mechanism, that it has impact on your neighboring country. If you don't come up quickly with agreements on how to share costs, or at the end, when it becomes critical, what does it mean that you are want to rely on your neighbors? How can you trust that? And in order to make these steps, and I'm pretty sure these kind of things are needed in order to make it affordable for the future, because if we are not working a bigger system, then it becomes extremely expensive and we really lose support of the society. But it means that we have to think about that, everyone is in his own role, how we can really make steps. And not always looking only at what is the interest of your country. Because if this is the way we want to continue, we will fail.
Robert.
So complementing what Ben said, I think you mentioned that this should be preferably done in the regional fora, because maybe the pan-European solutions, harmonized pan-European solutions, will be much more difficult. So I think it's important to underline that we should call for that the colleagues from Brussels will allow the regional differences, because this is crucial. And sometimes when we, and I believe this is exactly what Oxen said regarding the perfectness. And we would like to be, if you would like to be perfect and have the same solution in the whole European Union, then obviously this will take much more time. So we should make it step by step, also in this respect.
So maybe from the regulator side, any comments, question? Do we have? Yeah.
So thank you. Rainer Kaisinger from E-Control, the Austrian regulator. Just a few reflections now upon the last few minutes on this coordination and regions and so forth. In terms of regions, I personally think that we got more than plenty. We have regions for the T1DP, we have the PCI, we have the CCRs, we have synchronous areas, we have CCRs. We got now areas that are covered by RSCs. To be honest, sometimes it's hard to understand for people who work in this every day to really be on par with all the different regions and the different purposes. So I would think that some streamlining in this would certainly help, and I think the system operation regions are a good first step, but it's not going to solve everything. Then in terms of regulators and their role, with the recast ACER regulation, I think a good step was done in giving more competence into an authority that can act as a more global player in this case. ACER now has the competence to take regional proposals and regard them as important for the integration of the IEM, and is probably going to do so with a few proposals coming up and make a decision on that. But frankly, what remains unresolved is the enforcement after a decision was taken on one of the terms and conditions. And as a third point, even the latest regulation or legislation that we have now in work, the Clean Energy Package with its nuances on action plans and derogations, where it's again action plan fully in national hand, where a member state can set actions that have a massive impact on neighbors, neighboring member states, is maybe not the right signal either. So I think in terms of developing future legislation that really promotes regional cooperation, and not only on TSO and regulators level, but also in a legislative process already, would be welcome. Thank you.
Another one? Yeah.
Marco Pasqua de Bisceglie, Italian regulator and co-chair of the ACER System Operation Task Force. Cooperation is of utmost importance also for between regulators and TSOs, member states. There are all actors, and RSC obviously, there are all actors of the in the same field. There are a lot of new challenges. For example, 70% provisions, coding and security analysis, the evolution from RRC towards RCC, and the more tasks given by the Clean Energy Package. Regulators are well aware of all these challenges and are all aware that the implementation is quite ambitious, and the time given for this implementation may be termed to be too short for a proper implementation. So from one side, I appreciate that you mentioned a pragmatic approach in order to develop the proper coordination. On one other side, we have also to highlight that, okay, there is a regional fora, there can be system operation region. There are a lot of different regions, as mentioned by my colleague. Okay, an alignment of this region is much welcomed. Most of these regions were developed because of different purposes. Now, probably the next step is to try to align, to reduce the number of the different perimeters and configurations. But on the other side, we cannot neglect that there are cross-region coordination. For example, remedial action adopted in one region may have a strong impact on another region. This is a key point. It was addressed by ACER while deciding in last June about Article 75 proposal for clean security analysis. Regulators are expected that some INCs will be included by TSOs while submitting Article 76 regional proposal by next December. But we know that this will be only the first start of a long process. Last point is the enforcement. Clean Energy Package gives enforcing power to the regulator where the RSC or RCC in the future is seated. This is, from one side, quite clear. For example, Belgian regulator will have enforcement power for Coreso, while German regulator for Tescinet and something like that. But because of the opening of the widening of the regions, we're taking a proper coordination of all the NRAs involved in this process is much of utmost importance. Regulators will strive to find a proper way to coordinate. This topic was, we started discussing on this topic. We are a very, very first preliminary point, but we will for sure guarantee a proper cooperation also in assessing all the new challenges posed by the new regulation.
Thank you. So it looks like we have only 2 minutes left, so maybe we can take this input from regulators and have a final word conclusion by each of you based on this input plus any advice you would give to the RSCs moving forward.
Well, that's a bridge too far, I think, but at least one of my wishes would be that in the field of regulators, if we want to keep up the speed in developing those services and improve the system, some kind of one-stop shopping would be helpful to get speed, because otherwise we have to wait on too many occasions. On a far broader level, if I'm allowed to make one wish, don't create another energy package with a lot of new stuff. Maybe the next energy package should be the package of simplification of the first 4 packages.
Maybe very short that what I'd like to say that first don't forget why we do that. I think this is really important, that all our actions is really a function of why. And the second, it means that there are basically different ways to achieve the same goal. And we should really respect these different approaches. And at least in the Baltics, we like to really keep this such decentralized, digitalized, lean approach as we have so far. That we don't like to see that we're forced to do something because if someone really decided that you really have to copy-paste someone, some other experiences, maybe not which suits to us.
Yeah, my wish would be that listening carefully to what we have all said and also the response from the audience and the regulators, then there are many things which we can address and which should improve. And at the end, I think that if we all acknowledge the necessity to incorporate more renewables into the system, we are all convinced on that one, then it's not about pointing to others, but also pointing to ourselves. And it's also raising the questions, what can I do? What can I deliver? What can I do next day different from today in order to make the next steps? And that is also looking at how can we jump over our own shadow regarding the interest of myself, of my company, of the country. I mean, we have to really look, if we want to really take this challenge, we have to do it in a different way. And we're not looking at others, but also what you can contribute to that one. And if we all take that behavior together, all in this room, I'm pretty sure we can make the difference in the next decade.
See, as mentioned before, we are in the same boat. TSOs, the regulator, member states, with the common goals to maximize the social economic welfare for the societies. So we have to move forward all together to try to make more efficient the process, also to simplify is another important key.
Difficult to be the last with the wishes. I would agree with everything that was said before, but I think the important for the precondition for that we have commonly the same understanding of the issues we are talking about, and this is what I would like to have a wish of.
Okay, so thank you very much to all the panelists for this very transparent and active discussion, and I hope you will enjoy the next part of our conference. Thank you.